Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Kyle Henderson and Tony Sukalis. We're talking about our BamaInsider.com top 40 countdown, moving all the way to number one. Today, we start off with a punter and someone that Tony has been tracking for quite a while. Is obviously excited to talk about it. Perine, who played a significant amount as a walk-on freshman, played in, I believe it's 6 games last year and had an average of 44 yards per punt. Tony, you think he can really win that job going into the 2020 season?
I think so too, because if you look at I definitely think so. If you look at the punters on Alabama's roster, they've got Skylar DeLong, who's been inconsistent his whole college career, and then you've got Will Reichert, and Will Reichert's probably capable of doing the job as well. But if you look, do you really want Will Reichert to be doing kickoffs, place kicking, and punting? I think, especially coming off an injury, why risk it when you have a capable option in Ty Perine? And he proved more or less. I know he had the drop against LSU, and not all his punts really got a lot of air, but for more or less he was solid at the position, and more solid than what Alabama's had really since J.K. Scott. So I'm obviously a big believer in him, and I think he can continue to progress at that punting position.
I think when you look at Alabama, obviously their offense is, completely loaded. The question marks are at the secondary, at least for me, probably for most people. But the special teams is something in an area that a lot of people who want to see improve. The punting unit, as you know, with J.K. Scott, saw a significant decline once he left. And they've been searching for that punter to come back. Now, it's interesting that you say Will Reichert could be a punter as well, because you don't see a lot of guys that are just kickers that are also punting. So it's kind of a three-person competition for that job as we go into 2020. Skylar DeLong, as you said, he has been inconsistent. I'm kind of curious to see if this will be his year. But Ty Perine, it seems like he's the guy who has not only a booming leg, but also some athleticism. I think there was a particular play last year where he not only punted it, but he ran down the field. I believe he made a tackle, or he was in on a tackle, something like that. So
yeah, it was against Tennessee. It was either his first or second punt. The guy broke a tackle, and then all of a sudden you see Ty Perine just pick him up and put him down. He definitely has some athleticism. And I think he was a former. I think a lot of these guys were, but I think he was a former high school soccer player, so he can move. So yeah,
I think like all jokes aside, it's great to have an athletic punter, but it also allows for some trickery. If you do like some sort of rugby punt, or you need for him to pick up some sort of, fourth down and short, who knows? You like a guy back there that can move a little bit. Number 29 in our top 40 countdown, Demarcco Hellams, the guy that a lot of people are really excited about now, a sophomore, 6'1", 213 pounds, saw time in all 13 games last year for the Crimson Tide. And as you know, Alabama loses both Xavier McKinney and Jared Maiden. So there's going to be a spot open for that safety position with Jordan Battle, I assume. So Daniel Wright, Demarcco Hellams, what's your take on Hellams getting some action this year at that safety spot?
I definitely think he'll get some action. It's just a matter of how much he gets. I think he's either going to get 1 or 2 roles. He's either going to be, the safety, the deep safety alongside Jordan Battle, which is when, the majority of sets, if you're that deep safety. Now in the dime package, he could move down to the money or box safety position. He has the capability of doing that. So there's a chance he does both, and that he plays deep safety out of every other package and then moves down to money out of the dime. We saw McKinney do that last year. The thing is, he'll be battling with Daniel Wright for that regular deep safety position. So he's probably going to be somewhere in the dime unit. It's a matter of, will he also be in the nickel and the base at that deep safety when the box safety is not needed. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think one thing to note is Demarcco Hellams and Daniel Wright, completely different players in terms of their size. Demarcco Hellams at 215 pounds and Daniel Wright 190 pounds. So Daniel Wright, when we watch him at practice real quick, he's in and out of his cuts. And Demarcco Hellams, he also obviously has a lot of athleticism, but he's that big thumper guy, a guy that I can't even imagine if he hits a wide receiver on some sort of crossing route. The guy's a big dude. So be curious to see what happens at that safety position. But I think depth is also an important factor. So Jordan Battle, Daniel Wright, Demarcco Hellams, all those guys, are obviously going to get their chance this year. Number 28 is actually Daniel Wright, redshirt junior. And Tony, in your article, you're talking about this is a make or break year for him. And when I was doing some research, as we just talked about, 6'1", 190, but I found this interesting rather. He's appeared in 31 games for Alabama, a lot of experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was such a productive guy. It seemed like coming up as a freshman, he was a hard hitter on special teams, and he just I think he's a guy that you'd expect to be a definite starter heading into the season. He's a guy that maybe you would have thought already kind of established himself into a role. He just wasn't able to do that through injuries and a suspension, and so I think if he's got everything figured out, I mean, this is his time to shine. This is if he doesn't do it this year, I don't know if he's going to do it. So he's a guy like Hellams in terms of, I think he could probably slip down and play that block safety. It probably, now that you say it, probably makes more sense for Hellams to play that role. But he could play the deep safety while Hellams played that block safety. And then the real battle, like I said before, though, is who gets the deep safety position alongside Battle when there isn't a box safety. And so I think, I gave it to Daniel Wright over Demarcco Hellams because of that experience you talked about. I think, with such a young secondary, you're going to want a guy with a little bit more experience, and maybe we'll start the season with Daniel Wright there just based on the fact that he's done it more.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I mean, when you look at the secondary, I mean, it's a youthful secondary. You're going to have Patrick Surtain, who's going to be a junior. And then if Daniel Wright really steps up and he becomes a veteran of that group, that's exactly what that secondary needs. So curious to see how it all transpires for Alabama's secondary. Moving on to number 27, Ali Kaho. Inside linebacker and a big-time special teams player. Tony's going to talk about that in a second, but just a guy who I feel plays very opportunistic football. We were talking about this yesterday, in prepping for today's video, and just a guy who's all over and a guy who provides that extra spark. He has great athleticism. Ever since he came to Alabama, people have been really fired up about him and really made some noise last year, especially on special teams.
Definitely. I mean, if the point I made in my article is if this was an NFL team, you had to cut it down to a 53-man roster. He wouldn't be one of the players you'd be, even worried about missing because he can do so much. I mean, he also played H-back out of the goal line set.
Yeah.
He did a little bit of everything, but 3 blocked punts on special teams. He's just always there, I'm a big New England Patriots fan, and they have Matthew Slater, who's just like a special teams genius. And I kind of think that's, they're different players, obviously, but that's kind of like what Ali Kaho is for Alabama. He's like the special teams, he's their best special teams player, and I think he can also make a difference on defense as well. He's an inside linebacker, and it's probably not going to get a starting spot just because I think, if you look at Dylan Moses and Christian Harris and all the depth they have there, he might not work his way into the starting inside linebacker position. But I think he's a guy that might be able to even bounce outside in certain packages. I don't think you're going to expect him to put his hand in the dirt or do anything like physical. He's not that big of a guy. But, Alabama kind of used Rashaan Evans, for example, both inside and outside. And I think maybe Kaho could have somewhat of a similar role in certain packages. At least he gives them that versatility at both positions.
Number 26 in our BamaInsider.com top 40. And to read the entire top 40, go to BamaInsider.com. This is a daily series that we have going right now during the summertime. Emil Ekiyor. He's going to be a redshirt sophomore, 6'3", 327 pounds. This guy has a high motor, and he actually graded out 78.1 on Pro Football Focus, his run blocking grade. So a very talented lineman. Alabama has a killer offensive line returning. Tony, do you think this is a guy who eventually ends up as a starter going into 2020?
I have him as a starter, and that's the reason why he's here is because I view him as the fifth offensive lineman, the guy that's going to step in when Neal switches out to tackle. But the reason why I like him here is because you're able to keep Landon Dickerson at center. So you have that experience at the center spot. And I think that's important. But also because look at the interior of Alabama's offensive line. If you have Ekiyor, you have him, then Landon Dickerson, then Deontay Brown. Those are 3 maulers up the middle. If I'm a running back in Alabama, I'm just falling behind those guys. I know, sometimes you like to run around the tackle, but it might just be a lot of inside running for Alabama just with those 3. Probably I don't know what the stats say, but definitely 3 of the best run blockers on the team right up the middle like that. They just steam people over.
Yeah, I think the offensive line is certainly going to have quite a few options just because Amelia Ekiyor could be that guard. You have Landon Dickerson who could switch to that guard. As we talked about, Darian Dalcourt is someone who's really up and coming. And then you have Evan Neal, Alex Otherwood. So just a ton of talent. And then Deontay Brown. I mean, my goodness. I mean, we've seen him progress season after season, and really surprised with him last year. So Alabama's offensive line completely stacked. Amelia Ekiyor is certainly a guy that we feel is going to have a big season. Good to see him at number 26 in the BamaInsider.com top 40. We appreciate you guys watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe. You can catch all the videos on the top 40 right on our YouTube channel. If you want more inside information on the players, go to BamaInsider.com. The free promo code is simply RollTide. At checkout, tons of recruiting information as we move into the month of June. For Tony Tsoukalas and Kyle Henderson, both of BamaInsider.com. We'll catch you next video series. Thanks.